Industria probably comes as close to Half-Life 2 in terms of tone and feel as I've ever experienced. I know this is a weird way of opening a review, but this was honestly one of the most standout aspects of the game to me. And it's all the more surprising that this kind of experience isn't more common, since Half-Life 2 is such a landmark title in gaming that it's weird how it never got that many imitators. Or maybe it did get a lot of imitators that all just don't register as such because of what they're missing. But Industria really manages to pull off one of the things that I so greatly enjoyed about Half-Life 2, and that's quiet time. Industria might be billed as a first-person shooter, but it feels like the shooting isn't the main focal point of the game. No, what I think is the most important aspect of the game is the sense of atmosphere you get when playing it. I'm not sure if this is something I can properly bring across in video review form, but playing through this game carried across a profound sense of loneliness with it. The game's setting is a bit ambiguous. It starts off in 1989 in East Berlin, on the eve when the Berlin Wall fell. From there it quickly moves over into an alternate reality though. Hakavik, the city you get to explore in this alternate reality, for the most part looks and feels identical to any old European city. Dense urban environments, mostly focused on foot traffic, interspersed with more open plazas and waterfronts along its river. But the obvious elephant in the room, the one you've undoubtedly noticed, are these weird looking glowing spheres and cables all around that give the game an otherworldly feel. This too is why I'm reminded of Half-Life 2. City 17 also had a distinctly European look to it that got overlaid by the starkly contrasting Combine technology everywhere. Hakavik looks familiar and completely alien at the same time, and its deserted streets and buildings really come together to form a very atmospheric setting. And if you pay attention to the notes you can find, you might notice that time doesn't seem to be running at the same rate in Hakavik as it does in East Berlin. Like I mentioned earlier, Industria is billed as a first-person shooter, so there is some of that going on as well. But unlike a lot of shooters, Industria has quite an economical approach to firefights, which is a bit at odds with the narrative, since the reason for the city being deserted stems from the fact that it was overrun by these machine enemies. However, the level design does a fantastic job in communicating what to expect from upcoming sections. And I like that the game gives attentive players an edge by letting them snipe targets they've noticed from afar. That doesn't mean you can get rid of all the enemies before they can get close to you, not by a long shot. The game often deliberately pits you against enemies in tight and closed spaces. And while some of the early enemies tend to be on the slower, lumbering side, later enemies have a nasty habit of running up to you, and these little buggers love nothing more than exploding in your face if you can't manage to take them out in time. As mentioned before, all the enemies in the game are mechanical in nature. This obviously also ties into the narrative of the game. The rise of the machines is the whole reason why Hakavik is entirely deserted, save for a single friendly voice that keeps you company and overall directs your progress through the game. Early in the game you encounter the character Brent, who serves as a vessel for exposition. He tells you why Hakavik looks the way it does and generally acts as an unseen ally in helping you where you intend to go. Though he's not just a glorified tour guide. I really enjoyed the interactions between him and our protagonist Nora. There are some nice humanizing touches in their dialogues. However, for a self-proclaimed narrative-focused game, Industria seems to not have much of a story, at least not on the surface. The general gist of the story is that Nora is trying to find her partner Walter, who has crossed over to Hakavik just before her. The game heavily relies on notes you can find lying around the place to clue you into what happened in Hakavik in the time between Walter's and Nora's arrival, which as alluded to lies about 20 years apart, even though they both departed East Berlin within minutes of each other. And this is where I feel the game stumbles a bit. Sure, the notes manage to paint an evocative picture of what happened in Hakavik and what the point of Walter's research that led to his travel to Hakavik was, but it's all just indistinct silhouettes. The game is content with leaving most of the mysteries it raises completely unresolved. It's nice that this opens up the events that happened before Nora's arrival to speculation and interpretation, but unfortunately it means that the part of the story we as players get to experience is little more than glorified archaeology. The game also includes a few interludes where you're sent to this mysterious black and white library. None of the documents you can find here make any sense, and wherever you go you can hear whispers that also tie into the narrative. There's also a theater where these short little performances give further insight into the narrative. While these detours are interesting, I feel that they might just be a bit too far out of left field because they don't contribute much to the experience and give off the waft of pretentiousness. As mentioned before, a lot of the time the game uses Brent, the voice on the other end of your phone line, as a means to tell you where to go next. But what I love is that it never outright specifies how you would get there. Now the level design is fairly linear and filled with invisible walls, so you're not bound to get lost on your way there, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any puzzles to solve that hinder your progress. Modern games typically highlight everything for for you, where you need to go, what you need to pick up, and where you have to use or place what you've picked up. Industria does none of that. It harkens back to a time when you had to actually explore the spaces you were presented with. It makes you pay attention to your surroundings, it sears into your mind the layout of the levels you're in. You're not constantly looking at a minimap or following a floating marker to your next objective. While fundamentally you're still just doing what you're being told, the lack of UI helpers means that there's a certain amount of mental legwork you have to do in order to find your way around these spaces. This deliberate lack of creature comforts is extended in the way ammo and health pickups are treated. For one, there's no regenerating health. Just as in the good old days, you have to make do with medkits. Is it realistic to find random healing items strewn about enemy-infested territory? Hell no, but not any less so than magically returning health while you're hugging the nearest chest-high wall. Healing in a shooter like this has always been part of your resource management, something you had to pay attention to. And given that healing in this game takes a few seconds and leaves you vulnerable to enemy attacks, there are tactical considerations to healing during combat. Something that took a moment for me to register was that ammo is rarely found lying around in the open. At first I was a bit irritated because the first big plaza you get to explore that's filled with enemies quickly depleted all the ammo I had, and I thought I was gonna have to rely on my pickaxe to beat a lot of the enemies. However, I took a second to gather my bearings and noticed these wooden crates with the word supply written on them. Breaking them with my pickaxe revealed that this is where most of the ammo is hidden. Maybe I've missed a tutorial prompt at some point, but if I didn't, then I have to say that the design of these crates is a bit too understated and not immediately obvious that they should be smashed to replenish ammo. I get why the devs did it. Not having ammo lying around means that you can't just circle strafe around the courtyard like a popcorn machine in a centrifuge while popping off enemies and replenishing your ammo simultaneously. Just like healing, smashing a crate takes deliberate time away from the shooting. However, in practice I never really tried to replenish my ammo during firefights anyway. I just tried taking out all the enemies around me and then did my victory lap to satiate my inventory. Overall, I have to say I really enjoyed playing Industria. If there's one complaint I can lodge at it that isn't related to a few technical inadequacies, the game is fairly resource heavy and I encountered quite a few bugs and glitches, it's that there's just not enough of it. As it stands, it's barely 4 hours long. Now don't get me wrong, those are some pretty damn excellent 4 hours you get to spend here, but at the end of the day, Industria feels more like a proof of concept, or a short demo of what the actual final game should be. It's clear that the story isn't over yet, given the rather abrupt ending and lack of resolution to some of the more pressing questions. And I appreciate that the game made by a handful of people that favorably compares to a title like Half-Life 2 while looking and sounding as good as it does wouldn't clock in at 20 hours or something like that. I'm not faulting the developers for aiming high and coming up short on the length of a game. What I'm trying to express here is that you should absolutely go out and play this game. Give these guys all the money they deserve so they eventually get to make that expanded version of what they've envisioned with this lovely atmospheric gem of a game.